Hello and welcome, friends. Today's talk, Symbolic Christmas. Next Sunday's talk, the New Year. The United Lodge of Theosophists, Declaration. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it time and inclination to take part in side issues. The work in that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in this true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be better able to help teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following is the form signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge, as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part, other than that which I myself determine. A reading from The Light of Asia by Edwin Arnold. Lo, the dawn sprang with Buddha's victory. Lo, in the east, flame the first fires of beauteous day, poured forth through the fleeting folds of night's black drapery. High in the winding blue and herald star faded to paler silver, as there shot brighter and brightest spars of rosy gleam across the gray. Far off the shadowy hills saw the great sun, before the world was ware, and donned their crowns of crimson flower by flower, felt the warmth of morning, and gainfold their tender lids. Over the spangled grass swept the swift footsteps of the lovely light, turning the tears of night to joyous gems, decking the earth with radiance, broidering the sinking storm clouds with a golden fringe, gliding the feathers of the palms, which waved glad salutation, darting beams of gold into the glades, touching with magic wand the stream of rippled ruby, in the brake finding the mild eyes of the antelopes, and saying, "It is day." In nested sleep, touching with the small heads under many a wing, and whispering, "Children, praise the light of day." Whereat there piped anthems of all the birds, and coil's fluted song and bulbul's hymn, the morning of the painted thrush, the twitter of the Surrey birds started forth to find the honey ere the bees be out. The gray crows caw, the parrots scream, the strokes of the green hammersmith, the mynas chirp, the never finished love talk of the doves. Ye, and so holy was the influence of that high dawn, which came with victory, that, far and near, in the homes of men, there spread an unknown peace. The slayer hid his knife, the robber laid his plunder back, the shroff counted full tale of coins. All evil hearts grew gentle, kind hearts gentler, as the balm of the divinest daybreak lighted earth. Kings at fierce war called truce. The sick men leaped laughing from beds of pain. The dying smiled as though they knew that happy morn was sprung from fountains farther than utmost east. And over the heart of sad Yasodhara, sitting forlorn at Prince Siddhartha's bed, came sudden bliss, as if love should not fail, nor such vast sorrow miss to end in joy. So glad the world was, though it wist not why, that over desolate wastes went swooning songs of mirth, the voiceless of bodiless prets and boots. Foreseeing Buddha and Devas in the air, cried, "It is finished, it is finished." And the priest stood with the wandering people in the streets, watching those golden splendors flood the sky, and saying, "There hath happened some mighty thing." Also, in ran and jungle grew that day friendship amongst the creatures. Spotted deer browsed fearless with the tigress fed her cubs, and cheetahs lapped the pool beside the bucks. Under the eagle's rock the brown hares scoured, while his fierce beak but preened an idle wing. The snake sunned all his jewels in the beam, with deadly fangs in sheath. The strike let pass the nestling finch and emerald halcyons, sat dreaming, while the fishes played beneath. Nor hawked the merops, though the butterflies, crimson and blue and amber, flitted thick around his perch. The Spirit of the Lord lay potent upon man and bird and beast. Even while he mused under the Bodhi tree, glorified with the conquest gained for all and lighted by a light greater than days. That is from The Light of Asia. Thank you. And now for today's talk, Symbolic Christmas.
Thank you. Friends, Christmas has been celebrated for thousands of years. Before the past 2,000 years, it was celebrated as the birth of the sun gods and was a universal celebration. Now the season has become associated with the birth of Christ primarily in the Western world anyway. And it's important for all of us, though, to take advantage of the opportunity brought by this season. Good deeds and thoughts carried into expression have a tenfold power during this season than at another time. This is the season of the winter solstice, or birth of the sun. We've lost the key to understanding the Christ principle and our birthright to greatness that is now marred in this age of materialism. Jesus clearly articulated our birthright when he said that we could do greater things than he did. This season of the birth of the sun is the opening of the floodgate of the most important cycle of the year. Behind the physical sun is the spiritual sun. The innocence of our age, loving and giving, shines through. In this iron or dark age of spiritual darkness, whatever knowledge we have gained in all of the previous ages must be expressed through universal brotherhood to bring in the next age, which is the golden age. Up until the human stage, nature naturally moves the eternal, purely spiritual life wave upward, gaining experience in the material, mineral kingdom, then the plant kingdom, then the animal kingdom, then the lighting of the mind, and the human kingdom. From this point on, experience is gained by self-induced and self-devised efforts of the individual, the family, the community, and the nation. So we as individuals bear responsibility for all around us in dealing with our own karma through the karma of our nation and the world. We bring about the golden age of nature and all therein to the degree that we are successful in our journey from that innocent, purely spiritual life wave back to the purely spiritual perfected individuality with life experience. That's a greater cycle, our coming down in the material and getting that experience and then going back to the source of our being. So we are responsible for our own welfare as well as that of all the kingdoms of nature. Earth is a living entity, and how we take care of her and all of nature will come back to us. Most of humanity is searching for truth, permanence, and real ideas. Great beings come at assigned times, such as the Messianic cycle, to give us a portion of their knowledge and give an impulse to move humanity forward. Jesus came in the 5,000-year cycle and taught similarly to Buddha. These great beings always point to our inner light, expression of giving in service, of love, of brotherhood, of every thought that makes for good, regardless of our material possessions. The Upanishads tell us that he who dwells in all beings and within all beings, whom all beings do not know, whose body all beings are, and who rules all beings within, he is thyself, the ruler within, the immortal. As the reading by the first speaker from the Light of Asia indicates, this is a special season for regeneration. There is one deity, one unity, but there are many powers of natures that are deemed God by many nations. Behind life, which is jiva, is intelligence. It is organized, but nature is so fast that our senses confuse us as we see it as chaos. The regenerative power is the Akashic light. The lower part degenerated by matter being the astral light. All factors combine together in this season to make for goodness. December 25 is celebrated by Christians as the birth of the Jesus. But few realize that the individuality called Jesus is representative of that divine light, also represented by Buddha, Krishna, and other known and unknown great beings. The birth of Jesus was fixed by Pope Pius I at December 25. This is the time when the sun starts to turn from its southward direction down in the matter and then turning northward towards spirituality, back out of matter. As a biblical Jesus, there is no historical record. But calculations based on cycles, the topic of our presentation the second of this month, and preserved for us by the wise ones in the ancient teachings, tell us that a wise one was with us in the flesh near the time ascribed to the life of Jesus. H.P. Blavatsky reckoned that the biblical Jesus was the life of Joshua ben Pandira, who lived around 150 BC. Three Christs can be discerned in the gospel narrative. These are the cosmic, the deific life and presence in nature and all things, the mystical, or the Christ presence in every human being, and the individual. Such as the great figure who appeared on earth about 2 millenniums ago. The 5 major stages in the life of our Lord are passed through by every aspirant to perfection. So therefore the story of Jesus is the story of every one of us. The nativity, the baptism, the transfiguration, crucifixion, and the ascension of the Christ. These all portray by allegory and symbol the experiences of every human being who at any time finds the Master's feet. The great spiritual teachers known to man all have births of miraculous and divine order. They are threatened at birth by an opposite power, such as King Herod. They are tempted, persecuted, and finally put to death, whereupon they descend into the underworld and then rise again from the dead. We can only conclude that behind these facts lie certain basic spiritual truths. In other words, the recorded history is the drama of the growth and unfoldment of the soul. King Herod and others symbolize the illusory world of material existence. This existence which ever strives to kill the awakening perceptions and obscure the fact that the immaculate birth is not that of the physical body, but the mystic birth of initiation. Perfected human beings, those who bring knowledge, show the way, and leave paramitas behind for us to follow. The life known as Jesus was one who came to show the way, but no human has been mistreated and misunderstood as has been the Jesus image. This image represents the embodiment of law, but the church has taken him as a unique event. Why not go with the truth of the Christ principle, that Christ, which is within the heart of every human being, rather than thinking of Christ or God as someone outside ourselves? The Christmas lesson in the Eternal Verities starts with the following memory verse. The circling path of time through starry spaces wide hath turned earth toward the sun once more, and 'tis the Christmas tide. Toward life and life we move, with hearts refreshed we sing, the seed time of old earth renewed, to all this message bring. Goodwill to all that lives, a waking time of heart, in service that the masters teach, rejoice whate'er the port. And this the Christ in all, and all men brothers be, one source of light and life, and love, the soul's own radiancy. The story of Christmas ties in with that of the law of cycles. The ancients said that on both the longest and shortest day of the year, June 21 the longest, December 21 the shortest, the sun stands still and trembles in the balance before it turns on its journey, whether to the north or south again. So we have the word from them in the Latin language, solstice, or sun, and sistere, or to stand. Of course, the ancients and we know that the sun never really stands still, but seems to as we watch it from the earth. So also the sun does not move at the rate it seems to us each day across the sky. It is the earth's turning on its axis every 24 hours that gives the appearance of the sun's moving. Now, north of the equator, the sun is rising on the eastern horizon, way down in the south, and shines in our south windows almost all day. Comes the winter solstice, December 21, the sun begins to climb. In the springtime, it makes its circuit from east to west. For 3 months it moves by degrees up to the north until its apex on the summer solstice, and then moves on toward the south in its risings and settings. When the sun rises midway of the horizon, we are greeted by the sky. Comes autumn with its equinoctial storms. Further down to the south moves the sun, till it can go no further. Again we have come to December 21st to begin the real new year according to nature's clock. Then it is the seeds beneath the earth get a message from the sun to germinate, although it be months yet before the plants will venture forth above the soil. The very ancient peoples, Indians, Egyptians, Persians, Greeks, Americans, etc., thought of the sun as a life giver to all growing things. But they knew it to be only a symbol of the true sun, the one light, the self. They knew that the self acts only through beings, and that this great sun of our world was just an instrument or lens of the true unseen sun. So that yellow ball we see in the sky is the symbol of the sun, but behind it is the spiritual sun. And when they sang their hymns to the sun in this cycle, it was with the thought of acting for the self in every heart. A memory verse for students of the eternal verities is, quote, "That which giveth sustenance to the universe and to ourselves, from which all doth proceed, and into which all must return, that thou art. in the golden vase of thine earthly body may the pure light of the spiritual sun shine forth, that thou mayst know the truth and do thy whole duty on the journey back to the sacred seat. There's a time when people come to think of the forces and beings in the sun as making up our being, which they worshipped as the sun god, which much as some perhaps think of God as a great good man outside themselves, rather than as the real self within which within every being. It was on the 21st of December that the sun gods went down under the earth, and as the ancients thought, to help the souls, the seeds imprisoned there. Remaining for 3 days, they came forth triumphant in all their glory on December 25th. And this was the new birth of their sun gods. The Egyptians celebrated the sun cycle by the singing of hymns to the image of an infant, symbolizing their sun god been born again. So it seems fitting that an elder brother who was born into the world to be a teacher of the three truths should have his birthday at the birth time of the new cycle. That, anyway, must be what the Catholic Church Fathers thought when it was given to them to decide on a day to celebrate hundreds of years after the birth of Jesus. No one really knew by then when he did come, neither the day nor the year. Only very wise men knew that because very wise men know that because they know the cycles. Yet we know something about cycles. We know that it takes the sun about 25,868 years to travel through the signs of the zodiac. There are 12 signs, so dividing 25,868 by 12, we find that it must take about 2,155 years for the sun to move from one sign to the other. It also seems as if the old world learns and forgets in that time, so that a wise elder brother has to come to remind us again of what we have forgotten. 2,155 years is the cycle which marks the time when a messenger is needed. Well, the sun turned into the constellation of Pisces about 255 BC, and that means that a wise one came somewhere around that time before the year 1, which is usually reckoned as the birth year of Jesus, which is year 1, but it's actually a couple of years, 100 years before that, when it's thought that he actually came. Again, very close to 1900, the sun passed into the sign of Aquarius, so it looks very much as if Jesus was born at least 150 years before they reckon his birth. The results of this calculation parallel the determination of Talmud scholars and HPB that the personality known as Jesus was actually Joshua ben Pandira. Joshua ben Pandira. A messenger like Jesus is usually recognized only by a few at first. Jesus never wrote anything, and those who knew him did not write of him till long after he had died. So all we have is a few legends about him, and we can only know he was a great teacher by his wise sayings, which are according to the three truths. These truths form the basis of the three fundamentals of Theosophy. These fundamentals are summarized in Volume 1 of the Secret Doctrine, that's right there, starting on page 14, and symbolized by the white lotus cited on page 574 of this Secret Doctrine. They are absolute and cannot be lost, but yet may remain silent for lack of speech. The three keys relative to humanity. 1. The soul of man is immortal, and his future is the future of a thing whose growth and splendor has no limit. 2. The principle which gives life dwells in us and without us, is undying and eternally beneficent, is not heard or seen or smelt, but is perceived by the man who desires perception. 3. Each man is his own absolute lawgiver, the dispenser of glory or gloom to himself, the decreer of his life, his reward, his punishment. These truths, which are as great as is life itself, are as simple as the simplest mind of man. From a historical perspective, we know less about Jesus of Nazareth than we do about Krishna, Buddha, or any of the divine beings we have heard of. All we know about Jesus is recorded in Bible accounts. In the biblical story, Jesus was called the Christ, the illuminated one, because he had learned so perfectly that he knew only how to think every thought and do every deed for and as the higher self, before he entered that baby form in Bethlehem of Judea on the day now called Christmas. Wise men knew the cycle then and were expecting this little one, so they came there from far eastern countries to greet the babe with gifts and thanksgiving. They gave him gold as symbol of the sun. They gave him frankincense and myrrh because these had mysterious healing qualities to protect them, symbols of love and thoughtfulness, as all the gifts should be. Little did it mean to wise men that Jesus was born in a lowly manger, with patient oxen mulching the sweet hay thereby. They knew that the glory of Jesus would never come from riches and lands, but from knowing and showing the treasures of the soul. And as they looked for the birthplace, they found a star which led them to where he lay, that star called the Star of Bethlehem. It is recorded that Jupiter and Saturn were in conjunction in this cycle, so that they looked like one bright star. All nature seemed to know that the cycle for the messenger had arrived. As Joseph, the father of the little Jesus, looked up into the air, the legend tells, he saw the clouds astonished, and the fowls of the air stopping in the midst of their flight. The sheep, while scattering, yet suddenly stood still. And as he looked into the river, he saw the kids with their mouths close to the water and touching it, yet not drinking. He saw a bright cloud overshadow the cave, and suddenly it was a cave, such a blinding light. It was in the cave, such a blinding light that their eyes could not bear. The oxen fell at their knees, and the shepherds sang hymns of rejoicing, and to this day the custom lasts of singing about the birth of Jesus, and they say that on Christmas alone, of all days, always the oxen kneel. In ancient England, the hawthorn was said to bud on the 24th and blossom the 25th of December in memory of that birth. Another recognition of the cycle was use of evergreen trees at Christmas time, because long ago 'twas thought the spirits of the world, of the woods and dells flocked to the evergreens, and there were protected from frost till milder season. So while at Christmas time we remember the birth time of Jesus and give gifts as the wise men did of old, but now in memory of the great messenger, the Christ, Theosophists do not forget December 25 is the hidden birth time for all of nature. Without the timing of the sun on its cycle then would be no glorious bursting forth at Easter time of all the living things in earth, of trees, plants, and little creatures. Above all, let us not forget that we too are sons, reflecting the true Son, the Self. And as we turn on our course, ever acting for the Self, we are, day by day, coming to the light. Can it be that, like Jesus and other elder brothers, we too may become illuminated ones, Christ, to younger brothers in ages far away? So we'll stop it there and open the floor for any comments or questions. Merry Christmas.
What did this Dan Pandura do that he's noted for as the...
Well, there's a story, historical story, which kind of parallels that which is brought out in the Bible.
Mhm.
But in this student's opinion, what's brought out in the Bible is significant to everyone because that's what we all go through. So it could be the story of each of us.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Could the birth story of Jesus have some miraculous archetypal significance? Because at the time, the firstborns were being murdered by the state.
Theosophists know there's no such thing as a miracle, unless you call a miracle something we don't really understand right now. These all occur in cycles. In talking about the firstborn being killed, that's the biblical reference the student recalls. How this ties in is just within the law of cycles, and I don't have it in my fingertips exactly what an answer to your question is, but you might want to share your thoughts on that. If not now, later.
There's this idea that Jesus is an archetype, transcends whether or not he was a historical figure or not.
Sure it does. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a long list of them. As I said earlier, we don't even know who they all were, came to try to help us, and who they might be around us now trying to help us. But we know that we're getting help. Masters are out there trying to do what they can under the law of karma to help us, whether we see it or not on a day-to-day basis.
Can they become more visible with helping?
More visible?
With helping?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. Not through our material eyes. We would. It said repeatedly in
No need to material, just help.
the literature, makes sense. It's unbelievable on a material level. But there is that transition that we go through when we become material. Go from material to spiritual. As a spiritual being, we know everything at every moment in time. It's unbelievable on a material level, but that's what this is referred to in the literature. So yeah, there's definite reason for hope. Whether we see it or not today is a different story. We are eternal pilgrims. Out of the body more than in the body. So we will see it at the end of our lives. The student understands that all of our life flashes before us, all of our lives in the past, and that's an eternal, forever process. And what we come here to do. But it just flashes before us when we're first born, and it goes away from most of us unless we're probably a perfected being. I suppose they all know all the time, embodied or not. But we don't. We forget very quickly. Well, we will call it, well, I can throw a few things more in here. I only went about a third of the way through my notes, believe it or not. It says, masters of wisdom were called trees of righteousness because they hewed down the tree below with the strong axe of dispassion. That's a key word to remember. Discrimination, dispassion. More recently, in the 1800s, the custom of the Christmas tree started in Russia, then in Germany, then in the New World, as well as the whole world. The ancient northern peoples of Europe had a like reverence for the pine and fir trees and made great use of them at their various festivals. The pagan priests of ancient Germany, when celebrating the first stage of the sun's return toward the vernal equinox, held in their hands highly ornamented pine branches. And this points to the great probability of as for the now Christmas custom of lighting Christmas trees, being the echo of the pagan custom of regarding the pine as a symbol of a solar festival, the precursor of the birth of the sun. Its adoption and establishment in Christian Germany imparted to it a new and Christian form. One legend is that near the cave in which was born the Savior of the world grew 3 trees, a pine, an olive, and a palm. On the holy eve, when the guiding star of Bethlehem appeared in the heavens, that star which announced to the long-suffering world the birth of him who brought to mankind the glad tidings of a blissful hope, all nature rejoiced and is said to have carried to the feet of the infant God her best and holiest gifts. Among others, the olive tree that grew at the entrance of the cave of Bethlehem brought forth its golden fruit. The palm offered to the babe its green and shadowy vault as a protection against heat and storm. Alone the pine had naught to offer. The poor tree stood in dismay and sorrow, vainly trying to think what it could present as a gift to the child Christ. Its branches were painfully drooping down, and the intense agony of the grief finally forced from its bark and branches a flood of hot, transparent tears, whose large, resinous and gummy drops fell thick and fast around it. A silent star, twinkling in the blue canopy of the heaven, perceived these tears, and forthwith, confabulating with her companions, lo, a miracle took place. Hosts of shooting stars fell down like unto a great rain shower in the pine, until they twinkled, fell down on the pine, until they twinkled and shone from every needle from top to bottom. Then, trembling with joyful emotion, the pine proudly raised her drooping branches and appeared for the first time before the eyes of a wondering world. Before the eyes of a wondering world in most dazzling brightness. From that time, the legend tells it, men adopted the habit of ornamenting the pine tree on Christmas Eve with numberless lighted candles. And my voice is gone, so that's the end. You guys turn to talk. Okay.
Can we focus on the symbolism of the tree? The Christmas tree. It is, it's green.
Yeah.
It is life.
Right.
It is echoing of Yggdrasil, the Nordic conception of heaven and hell. Its roots straddle earth and the heavens. And we put Christmas presents underneath it. And it's red and white.
And it's evergreen.
Yes,
I mean, the individual tree, comes from the sea and lives and dies, but it's not annual. That's not, I'm just throwing that out. It might be symbological of eternal life.
I know Blavatsky wrote a little pamphlet book on the Christmas tree.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff about the Christmas tree.
Which is
there's a whole section down here about the Christmas tree. But
it's part of her history and historicity as a Ukrainian-Russian princess. It can be quite controversial to speak about because it might have something to do with the Muscaria mushroom and psychedelic states of consciousness.
Well, it can easily get very controversial because we the people, science, although it's made great strides in the last 130 or 40 years, still will not acknowledge what it can't see on a microscope, or what it can't touch, or whatever. You can feel electricity if you stick your finger inside it. But it is bit by bit learning that we must develop a symbiotic relationship with those masses of lives. We understand, we see only the tip of the iceberg, but there's masses of lives underneath. The Diane Chohans, and we have talks about them. They are forerunners of us. They created the mind and so forth. Those masses of lives are the architects in the way they form, and there's logic to all of this. But it's something that scientists should be really excited about. And I think they probably are. But they have to be able to demonstrate it on a material level to call it science. That's the way they see it in the sense that, like Einstein, very spiritual guy, he kept a secret doctrine at his bedside all the time. There's a lot in there about light. He transformed what's in there, in this Buddhist opinion, into his theory of relativity. So, and we've learned a lot in the last 10, 15, 20 years about different things, and you know, we will keep going, but we have to. I mean, I think there are, you know, some of the leading scientists, no question about it, are seeing that it's a everlasting process. They've had talks with the Dalai Lama, and they kind of talked past each other, but at least they talked. And that's recorded too, the conversations they had with him, trying to see what they can piece into science that's not in there right now. But you have to be able to call it science, you have to be able to repeat the experiment and all that. And when we get into the spiritual realm, you can't necessarily do that because you see things differently than I do, you know, and so forth. Everybody does. So
I've seen that term.
we can't articulate spiritual things.
I've seen that term, spiritual science or divine sciences.
Mm-hmm.
HPB is used.
Yeah, well, what is this?
Hmm?
You know, what is this? This is science.
Yeah, this is science too.
Yeah, this is the science of sciences.
Science of science.
What do we have? We have philosophy.
Krishna.
We have philosophy. Go ahead, help me out a little on this.
Well.
Science, philosophy, and the third item.
I mean,
Religion.
Huh?
Seership or clairvoyance, those are sciences.
Yeah,
Worship.
yeah. Worship is sort of science, religion. You got it.
Hypnotism,
Philosophy,
they
science, and
finally made,
religion. That's
material.
all over the place. Okay, we're going to call it quits and socialize a little bit. Thank you for joining us.